Hey Internet, it's me, Chef Lethal, here with another episode of Tasty Techniques for you. You know, all across the country right now, it's freezing. My father-in-law sent me a picture of his backyard covered in snow, and it looks cold, and I live in Florida, and I don't have to deal with that. But you know what it made me think? Soup. Yes, soup. And not just any soup, Italian wedding soup. Not only am I excited about this because it's easy and delicious, it's also one of my wife's favorites. And she doesn't know it's coming, so when she comes home, she's going to be surprised with a nice hot bowl of soup. Now, full disclosure, I'm going to be making two batches. One small batch just for me with vegetables and stuff in it, and one large batch with no vegetables in it because that's not quite her thing. So enough talk, let's look at what we're going to need. Now, for this recipe, you are going to need the following ingredients. You're going to need about 1 quart of chicken stock. Homemade would be best, that's what I'm using. If you don't have it, a good store brand would be just fine. Just try to stick for the low sodium stuff. I got a pound of ground meat. I'm using ground sirloin beef, but if you wanted, you could throw in some ground pork or veal, combination of all three, but I'm just sticking with the sirloin today. I've got on there about a half cup of panko breadcrumbs. I'm probably going to be using a little bit more than that, but that's just something that we're going to be eyeballing. And then I've got garlic powder, onion powder, dried basil, which I would recommend sticking with the dried herbs on this one. You don't want to use fresh because the fresh flavor is just going to get lost in the mix. Kosher salt, which is never optional. Some black pepper, which I'm going to be grinding right into the bowl. A little bit of neutral oil, and some other optional stuff, such as the vegetables that we're going to be using. I've got some kale and a carrot that I'm going to dice up, which I'm going to show you guys in just a sec. And also you're going to need 1 chicken egg. Tools and equipment this time is pretty light. You're just going to need 1 mixing bowl, 1 saucepan to actually make the soup in, 1 small skillet for testing, which I'll show you guys when we get there, and 1 dishing spoon or scoop. That is optional but recommended. Now I'm going to show you guys how to dice that carrot in just a second, but the longest thing that's going to take is for this stock to get to a boil. So since my wife is going to be home soon and I wanted this to be a surprise for her, I'm going to go ahead and get that going right now so we can do things a little bit more efficiently. So first I've got the quart of stock in her pot, and then I'm going to put in, I've got about a half a quart in there. Hit these on high, and I'm going to show you how to dice that carrot. Since this carrot is just for me, I don't really care for it to be perfect. I just care for it to be cut. So the first thing I'm going to do is get rid of that nasty little root there. Goodbye. And then I'm going to get rid of kind of the nub in there. Okay, I might save those for later. I might not. So now I've got this bit of carrot here. I'm just going to chop it in half or roundabout to make it a little bit easier to deal with. And actually I'm going to deal with the bigger end first. So the first thing that we need to do is make this stable, otherwise we're going to hurt ourselves. So I'm going to take off just the slightest little sliver very carefully from one side here, and that's going to give us a solid side to stand on. Then I'm going to just do the same thing off to the side just because that's what I want to do for no other reason. So then if you remember the onion, we were making a grid. So we're going to do kind of like that first, but we have to make these into kind of like sheets first. So I'm going to just kind of cut through, I would say 1/4 inch. It's not perfect, it doesn't have to be, but that's my best estimate, being sure not to get my fingers. Yeah, I'll leave that guy in there too. So then what we want to do with these sheets, or panels, or whatever you want to call them, is get those into smaller little sticks, like matchsticks. Now, ideally, they would be the same size as the panels as far as thickness, but again, this is just for me, I don't care. So now I'm going to line these up, and then, I mean, in the real world, I would chop all this to the same way and do this on one big batch, but I'll do that off camera. So I've got these 3 sticks here. They're roughly, that's actually pretty good. I'm pretty proud of that. So then we're going to do the same thing, making our little cubes. So just a little boom, just a little, you're going to feel a pinch. Ooh, hurts every time. Not for me, for the carrot. Unless you cut yourself, in which case, yeah, it's going to hurt. So I'm just going to finish up,
Again, they're not perfect. I've got some pieces that are a little bit bigger than others, but by and large, I'm actually pretty proud of that. So I'm going to finish this up with the rest of the carrot and set that aside, and we're going to do some cooking.
Gloves. Okay, we're going to start getting messy. I've got my pound of ground beef in my bowl. And before we start digging in here, I'm going to go ahead and turn on that small skillet I told you about at the beginning. I'm going to turn that on to about medium-ish heat because we're going to need to test this mixture after we put it all together. So I've got my meat in here. I'm going to start dumping in my ingredients. I've got about half a tablespoon of garlic powder, about half a tablespoon of onion powder, and about a whole tablespoon of dried basil. Boom. I've got all that panko breadcrumb. Like I said at the beginning, about a half a cup. Yeah, probably closer to 3/4 to maybe a whole cup. Play it by ear. You just want the mixture to be kind of dry. Salt, let's see, how much salt? Maybe about a tablespoon or so. You can be a little aggressive because the soup, it all goes together. And then black pepper, just a bunch of grinds here. I'm not going to really measure it. Yeah, that'll do. And then the egg. Do not crack it on the side. You're only going to get shards in there and make it hard for you later. So I'm going to hit it across the side, pop that in there. And now for the reason I have the gloves. We're going to get in here and we're going to get dirty. Now before I get in there with both hands all nuts and crazy, I'm going to take a little bit of my neutral oil and not dump it in here. I'm going to put a little bit in my skillet, maybe like a teaspoon or two, just to kind of make, we're going to be making like a meatball patty here in a second. So using both hands, I got gloves because it's just easier that way. We're going to get in and just give this thing a go. You want to make sure that all of the ingredients are mixed in. Everything looks homogenized and good. The mixture should be a little dry, but not like super dry. Should have a little bit of moisture. You'll be able to tell. I can already tell here. I'm gonna be able to do a little bit more breadcrumb, but I just want to work it a little bit more just to make sure. Okay, so I'm gonna add a little bit more of the panko. It's a little dry. It's a little wet, excuse me. And I also looked at the playback and I realized that my hand was in the way. Sorry about that, guys, but I was just mixing away. I'll try to be a little bit better about that this time. Already I can tell that panko is doing its job, soaking up that moisture. Yeah, this looks good. Looks like my oil is pretty warm too, so here's what we're gonna do. Now that we have a mix here, we have no idea what this tastes like. This is a main component of our soup. So what are we doing? We're gonna take a little bit here, not much, just a little bit, and I'm gonna form it into a little patty, just like so. And I'm gonna put it in the small skillet and we're gonna cook it up until it's done and then give it a taste. All right, here we go. Got my little meat puck. It's gonna go right into heat. Oh yeah, nice and hot. Let it go. Now, this is a perfect time for me to remember to tell you guys that I forgot something on the ingredient board. You're going to need orzo. If you don't know what orzo is, you're going to find it in the pasta aisle of your local grocery store. It looks kind of like rice, but it's a pasta. We're going to put it in the soup, and it's going to like absorb the chicken stock and some of the other herbs and seasonings and stuff, and it's going to taste great. So sorry about that, but it's kind of an integral part of the soup. So this step is optional, but how else are you supposed to know what your meat is going to taste like? Also, free snack. Actually, that's spot on. It's time to make the balls. This is what I'm talking about with the dishing scoop or spoon. It's usually, you see it like used for ice cream and stuff, because you can just scoop and then it's got an arm in here and it springs and pops things out. We're gonna use that for the meatballs. If you don't have this, it's okay. Just try to make them as uniform as possible. Admittedly, this is kind of a big scoop for a soup like this. My cat, everybody. But it does ensure that all of my meatballs are going to be pretty much the same size. So I'm just gonna pretty much fill all these up right to the top, form them a little bit in my other hand, and then just like that. So I'm gonna finish up this batch and I'll be right back. Now I've got my 2 pots here ready to go. Before I do anything, I'm gonna add some salt and pepper because I made this stock and I know that there is no salt in this stock whatsoever. So just a little bit there, because the broth is the main portion of the soup. and it better darn taste good. So I'm just gonna hit it with a little bit of that. A little S&P action, if you know what I mean. Give it a stir. Oh yeah. All right. And it's meatball time. And by meatball time, I of course mean vegetable time. So in my dish, I'm gonna throw in those carrots that I chopped up. Beautiful, get in now. I'm gonna toss in that kale that I told you about, just like that. Kabam, it's not very much. And it was just in a package that came pre-diced, shredded from the store. And then the orzo. Now the orzo I'm gonna add to both, and kind of use it as you want. I would say that was probably about a half a cup, maybe a little bit less. And I'm gonna do the same thing over in the big pot here. There we go. I'm gonna stir these up. And then let that cook for a little bit, and then it'll be meatball time. Once the orzo and vegetables have been cooking for just a few minutes, it's time to add the balls. Okay, all joking aside, we do need to add the meatballs right now, and you need to be careful. It does look like I made a little bit too many meatballs, and that's okay. I can just stick these in the freezer and wait for the next batch of soup that I'm going to make. So don't go overboard with the meatballs. You don't want too many. This isn't meatball soup. It's Italian wedding soup. And part of that wedding is making sure everything is happy in matrimony in the bowl. So you don't want to get too many in there. Now looking at what I have here, my meatballs are sticking out at the top of my soup just a little bit. That's fine, I probably should use more stock, but who cares, right? It's fine. So I'm gonna let this go for probably about 4 minutes or so, and then I'm just gonna flip the meatballs to make sure that they're cooked evenly. If you are making enough soup where your meatballs sink or are completely submerged, then you probably don't have to do that. Just let it cook for about 8 minutes and you're gonna be ready to serve it. Soup's on. That's all it takes, guys. I know it kind of seems like it's a lot, but trust me, once you get going, you get in the groove of things, start, getting your hands dirty and tasting the meat mixture and everything, it's gonna be great. Don't worry about it. In fact, I've made too many meatballs. I got like 8 meatballs in the freezer right now, ready for another batch. And next batch is gonna be double. I didn't make near enough. My wife's gonna kill me. Just kidding, I'll just make it again. It's no big deal. Anyway, the soup is delicious. The broth is meaty and warm, and it makes me feel good on the inside, and the meatballs taste like Italy, lots of basil and garlic with the carrots and the kale, and that's so good. You need to make this soup. It'll warm you right up. Anyway, thanks you guys for stopping by. I'm Chef Lethal. Thanks for watching this episode of Tasty Techniques. That's really good.